Microsoft SharePoint is a powerful collaboration tool if you know how to use it. This video is for non-technical folk who have either never used SharePoint before or perhaps are using it and don't feel they're getting the most out of it. I'm going to show you the basics and at least 3 ways to save yourself time using SharePoint, so stick around until the end. My name is Matt and I run a company called Labyrinth Technology that supports small businesses throughout the UK with their IT and cybersecurity. You can find a link to my LinkedIn profile in the video description. So there are actually several different ways that you can access files that are saved in SharePoint, and it's down to your organisation to decide what works best and to communicate that to staff. But I'm going to show you the primary methods used to access SharePoint files. So first of all, I'm going to show you the SharePoint Web Interface. Now, the SharePoint Web Interface is basically an intranet. It's a front end or a website that you can use to showcase your files or to display other useful information. So if you've got an intranet, if you have been set up with a SharePoint web page to use, then make use of it, because there could be a lot of useful information on here, like news or other useful links or events, for example. So make sure you pay attention to what's going on and what's changing in your SharePoint intranet. So depending on how your SharePoint's set up, these links are going to take you to a different place in SharePoint, or perhaps a third-party website, or to files and folders within your SharePoint environment. So if I click on Service Delivery, which is one of our SharePoint sites, you can see on here we've got some useful links that are helpful to our service delivery team, some news that's relevant to our service delivery team, and a visual way of accessing all of our different files and folders. Now, your SharePoint may not have this. You may just have a list of folders on the left. You may just have one folder on the left called Documents. It really depends how your SharePoint's set up, but I'm going to click into our demo library, and you can see here I've got a few different files and folders. If you don't have access to a file or a folder, then you won't see it in here. So if one of your colleagues can see a folder or a file that you can't see, then perhaps you don't have access to it, because access can get pretty granular in SharePoint. Now again, depending on how your SharePoint's set up, if you click on a file within this environment, it's either going to, so it's actually opening on a different screen, here we go. It's either going to open in the web version of Microsoft Office, or it's going to open in the desktop version of Microsoft Office. Now that setting can be configured by your IT teams at the back end as a default for everybody. So if everyone's got Microsoft Office desktop applications and your organization isn't trying to push you to use the web version of Microsoft Office, then it might be helpful to talk to your IT admin if this hasn't been set up to open in the desktop version by default. But here we go. I'm effectively think of it like streaming a file. If you're watching a Netflix video, you're not actually downloading it, you're streaming it. It never consumes space on your device. That's what's going on here. So this file is not saved to my computer, but any changes that I make will save in real time. So if you look in the top left here, we've got autosave is toggled to on. So if I literally just type one letter here, straight away you can see at the top that file is saving. And since we're taking a little while to save, there we go, that has now saved. So the changes you make, if you accidentally close this file or make a mistake, you can roll back to a previous version. So it's also helpful to know within Microsoft Office, if you click the name of the file at the top there and then click on version history, you can see on the right hand side all the previous versions of that file. So SharePoint, again, can, depending on how it's set up in your environment, can be configured to save hundreds of previous versions of the files. Your IT admins may have set a cap on that to reduce the amount of space that's being consumed, but you should see a fairly significant number of previous file versions here, and you can simply click on one of these if you'd like to restore it, or even just view it. If you want to view and compare and you're not sure which version you want to recover, this can be a really useful feature. It allows you to recover a file without having to contact IT and ask them to restore a backup. And when you are ready to restore a file, you can just hit the restore button at the top there, and that then recovers it as the latest version of the file. So that's a really useful feature that can save you some time. I'm going to hit restore here so that disappears. There we go. That was super quick. The other useful thing you can do here is if you want to rename the file, you don't have to come out of it and find it and right click it and rename it and go through all of that palaver. You can literally just click in the top there, and whilst you've got the file open, I can change that to, I can take out the word template, there we go, press enter, and that's saved. It doesn't even matter if there's other people in the file. They will still, the file name will change, and they can carry on working without losing any work. Which then brings me in nicely to the document collaboration functionality. If I had a colleague in this file, I would actually see in the top right here, their face will pop up. So that's how I know that someone else is in the file. And I will see what they're doing in real time. They will see what I'm doing in real time. So the point is that you can have multiple people collaborate on a document at the same time. That's a really powerful feature. There's no more of this file is locked for editing that you would get with a traditional file server. And you don't have to worry about conflict copies, all these duplicates and different versions of files that you can get with some sync applications. So definitely worth making use of that. Perhaps there are any certain use cases, you're not necessarily going to use that with every file, but if you do have a file, maybe a rota in a spreadsheet or some kind of project or legal document that a load of you are working on, then you can all just jump in and work on that together. We go back into the SharePoint Web Interface. If you did want to open the file from the web interface, you can just click on these three dots to the right of the file, click on open, and then click open in browser, and that will launch the file in the web version of Microsoft Office. So a lot of the functionality is the same here, but there are some limitations, and you notice the layout of the file has is kind of off. So yeah, there are pros and cons to the web version. The pro being that it's included in even the entry level Microsoft Business Basic license. But I think in most cases, most organizations are going to have the desktop version of Microsoft Office in place. The other way you can access SharePoint files is via OneDrive, if your organization allows it, or perhaps they are encouraging you to use OneDrive as the primary way of accessing your files. If you're not sure, make sure you talk to your line manager or your IT department, because they should offer you some guidance on that. But if you are using OneDrive, OneDrive effectively replicates a traditional file server experience. So what you're used to in terms of browsing network drives, the S drive, N drive, that kind of thing. So the folders will appear on your computer and effectively sync to your computer. By default, OneDrive will not actually save the files to your computer. So they will appear on the computer here, but you'll see we've got this little blue cloud icon under the status column. If I dive into one of these folders, if I click into demo docs here, I can see all of the files and folders that are in SharePoint here. So we go back to that SharePoint library. I'm seeing the exact same thing here, but they're not actually saved to my computer. They're not consuming space on my computer. So that's what the little cloud means. Once you first double click on a file or a folder, it will then save to your computer and it will stay on your computer. So we can see under the status column here, this documentation file, I've accessed that before because it's got a little green tick next to it. So that means it's saved on my computer. But it doesn't matter too much because if you double click on any of these files, if I double click on this one, that is still, it's going to take a little while longer to open the first time because it's downloading it to my computer, depending on the speed of your internet connection. But once that has opened, that will be, in fact that had already opened on the other screen there, so it did only take a few seconds. This is now saved to my computer, and next time I open it, it's going to be a much faster experience. But in the same way as if you open the file from SharePoint, we've still got that autosave turned on. This is still replicating the changes I make in real time back to Microsoft SharePoint, so you don't need to worry about your colleagues not having access to the latest version of the file that you're working on. The only time this could become a problem is if you were syncing a huge number of really large files, and OneDrive could get stuck, could have a backlog of file syncing, especially if you're working from home and you don't have very good internet at home. So something to keep in mind, if you do find that your colleagues are not seeing the same file versions that you're seeing, then it's probably that and usually you would see in the bottom right corner here, you've got this blue icon, but it's probably that there's a bunch of files still syncing. And usually that icon will have a little kind of refresh arrow on there if it's still syncing. You can hover over it and it'll actually tell you what is still syncing. So worth keeping in mind. In terms of what's the best method, you've got the SharePoint Web Interface, you've got OneDrive. Again, it's your organization needs to decide how they want you to use the system. There's different use cases for different platforms. Using OneDrive will replicate what most people are used to with traditional file server experience. There are some limitations of opening files directly from SharePoint. So for example, if I had let's say I had a AutoCAD document in here, AutoCAD file in here, you can't click on those files from SharePoint and launch them in AutoCAD. And that also wouldn't work very well because some of those AutoCAD files are incredibly large. So Microsoft Office documents, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF files, images, those kind of basic files in SharePoint, opening those from the web interface work great. And it allows you to get the full SharePoint experience. You can catch up with what's going on the intranet. You can open files in real time without worrying about whether they're synced to your computer or worried about them taking up space on your device. But yeah, that's why people would typically use the SharePoint web interface. OneDrive would be the best thing to use for teams that are using some of these more slightly unusual or more niche business applications, again, like AutoCAD or maybe Adobe Creative Cloud. Adobe products do offer the option to map document libraries from Microsoft SharePoint. So a document library is effectively a top-level folder in Microsoft SharePoint. So that can be set up. So if you are using Adobe Acrobat to edit PDF files, you can map that to access files directly from SharePoint without needing to sync the files with OneDrive. But otherwise, OneDrive is a solution for those teams that do just need to easily be able to access any files or just a certain few folders from SharePoint to edit in special business applications like AutoCAD. So in terms of how you create a file in SharePoint, that's going to depend on whether you're using OneDrive or wish to save it directly in SharePoint. One method is to open a Microsoft Office document, and just to start working on it, I'd recommend before you go too far with this that you get this saved in SharePoint. And whether you're using OneDrive or the SharePoint web browser, typically you'll be able to do this. So you just need to go to File and then hit Save As. And then you should have a list. You should have this will be the name of your company, but you should have a little SharePoint icon here. And you'll be able to see sites that you frequently access or sites that you're following. So I'll show you how to follow a site after this in SharePoint. But click the name of the site and click on the folder you wish to save the file in, and then you can enter a name here. So my training file. You can also enter the type of file. So this can actually be really useful if you want to save a file as a PDF. It's another thing you can do to save yourself time rather than messing around printing to PDF and then saving a copy of it. We could save a copy of this as a Word file, which I'll show you now. And then go back and save another copy as a PDF. But I'm going to save that as Word to start with because I want to make sure that we are capturing the changes that I make and I don't lose any work. So I can see again at the top here, now that that's in SharePoint, that autosave has toggled itself back on. So let's say I've finished here and I want to save a PDF copy. When I click File Save As, it's already in the directory where I previously saved that in SharePoint. And I can now just click PDF, hit Save, and that is going to create my PDF. So that's saved in SharePoint. It has also opened it in the web browser for me. And it does that because often people are doing this so they can maybe save or download a copy or print a copy and email it out to perhaps to a client or someone outside the organization. So that's really useful. And that really, while we're talking about emails, I will show you how we email a file from SharePoint First of all, we can see here we've got the following star here. So I'm following this service delivery site. If I just unstar that for a second, by default, all of your SharePoint sites, you're not going to be following them. You just need to click on that star and then you're now following that site. Now, it's not going to instantly show in Microsoft Office. It can take a few hours perhaps, or sometimes longer, sometimes quicker. So you will just need to be a bit patient and wait for that to show up there, but it will get there. Now, SharePoint's designed really to try and minimize the need for you to create multiple versions of the same document. It's not a good idea for organizations to be sending multiple versions of files around the company, downloading multiple copies or saving files as version 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. It's designed to kind of avoid that data duplication. So if I click on the attach file here, and it's going to show you files that you've recently had open. So if it's not going to work for PDF documents, so you would still need to download that and attach it. But let's say you just wanted to send an Excel or Word or a PowerPoint file or anything else like that, then you can just click on that file or open it, and then it's going to show in the recent items. And then you're going to get a couple of options. Now, this is really useful, and you need to think carefully about which one you click. Share link is going to look like it's attached the file to the email, but actually it's it's just sharing a link to the file. So that link is not going to work if the person you're sending it to does not already have access to the SharePoint file. So if you're sending it to someone outside of the organization, unless you've shared it with them in SharePoint, then the best thing to do is to click attach as copy. So if you just need them this one time, they just need to receive this file once. Then if you click attach as copy, it's going to download it for you, as you can see there, and attach it to the email. But I will just show you the other attachment option and click share link. And there we go, that has copied a link to the file there. So the benefit of doing that for people inside the organization is to reduce that risk of multiple versions, conflicting versions of the file flying around. And also, let's say this is some kind of report. I've sent that off to some of my colleagues. Then I realized I made a mistake in that report. I can just go in and change it in the report without needing to email this out again, because the people clicking on this link are only going to see the most recent version of the file at the time of opening it, because we haven't downloaded it. We're just giving them a link to conveniently access that file directly from SharePoint. So that's a really useful feature. The other thing you can do while we're talking about sharing files is copy a link to a file. So if you click the three dots here and click copy link, and it says there people with existing access can use the link. So I'm not opening up access to the outside world here. And I can use Microsoft Teams to perhaps share that with one of my colleagues. So if I open my Microsoft Teams, here we go. Perhaps I've got a team chat here and I want to share this file with them. And again, I don't want to download a copy or risk people having multiple versions of the file. So I'm just going to say, hey guys, see this useful report I created. And then I can press Control and V and that pastes it. And not only does it just paste a link, it also gives me a kind of visual here. I can see the front page. It's got the name of the file in the link. And all I've done is hit that copy link. And that just makes it a lot more engaging for people that are going to receive it. And then I hit post. And as with sending an email, if I've just gone and made a change to this, my team I don't need to send it to them again. My team are just going to click on this and they're going to see the changes in real time. Even if they click on this and I'm still working on it, as we said before, they will see me typing in the document and making changes to it. So that's a great feature. Now, in some cases, it's not so useful that people can see that you're working on the documents, or they can see unfinished draft changes. Now, there is a way to set SharePoint up for certain document libraries to have something called minor and major version control, which means people with the edit access will see the files that are being changed or the draft copies, and people with read-only access will only see published versions of files. Now, if you're interested in setting something like that up in your environment, that's something your IT will need to do, or if you'd like some help from us, then click on the link to my LinkedIn profile in the video description and drop me a message and we can have a chat. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do subscribe, because we'll be showing loads more really useful content for end users, for employees, for small business owners and IT professionals. Going back to different ways of saving files into SharePoint. The other option you've got is, if you're using OneDrive, you can just drag and drop a file into OneDrive. Or if we go back to using Microsoft Office, we can just click File, Save As, and then I've got my OneDrive link at the top here. So I can click in that Z demo folder that we were in, and click in one of these folders perhaps, and in the exact same way I can save a file, give the file a name, or save it as a PDF or different file types. Just to talk about this thing that keeps popping up for me, these are sensitivity labels. They're not set up by default in Microsoft Office or Microsoft SharePoint. They're useful for ISO 27001 in particular, or organizations in general that need to classify their information. We'll be posting a video in the future about these, but if you would like to talk about setting this up in your organization, again, add me on LinkedIn and drop me a message on LinkedIn and we can talk about that. It's relatively straightforward to implement, but otherwise ignore that. If you don't have that popping up, that's normal. It's not there by default. There we go. So that's now saved in OneDrive, and yet again, exactly the same experience. Autosave is turned on at the top. And I can click at the top there to rename the file. I can click on version history and access previous versions of my file. Now I've only just saved this, so I'm not seeing multiple versions there. Now the final method, if you are primarily using the SharePoint Web Interface, I appreciate this might be a bit confusing, giving you loads of different options, but again, it is down to your organization to decide and guide you on how you should be using SharePoint. Should you be using the web interface as the primary method? Should you be using OneDrive as the primary method? If they haven't given you that guidance, have a constructive and friendly conversation with your IT team or with your line manager, and just let them know that you're not quite understanding where you're supposed to be saving your files. Worst thing you can do is to just decide to boycott SharePoint and save the files in your desktop, on your documents, in your downloads, because those files are not going to be backed up. And if you lose your computer, something happens to it, or you leave the company, all of those files are going to disappear. Perhaps you're off sick, no one's going to be able to access those files. So really important you are saving files in the right place, and where to save them, because it's not just about which technology you should use, it's about which folder. So it's important you understand the folder structure, and again, if you've got any constructive suggestions for your department and in terms of how they can be restructured or work better for you, then make sure you do communicate that. But in SharePoint, you can drag and drop a file into here. So let's say you've been emailed a file as an attachment. You can click on that file literally as the attachment in Outlook and drag it onto the screen here into whichever folder you'd like it to go in, and that will save the file directly in SharePoint for you. You can also create new Microsoft Office documents by clicking the new drop down here and clicking Word, Excel, PowerPoint. This isn't personally my favorite method, unless your organization has set up different templates. So you can see here we've got a few different templates here. That's another great thing you can do in SharePoint. So you can see we've got a project proposal template, a documentation pack template, things that we do for our clients in terms of standardizing things. So if you are using templates, this is really useful. You can also set up templates in SharePoint that are accessible in Microsoft Office desktop application if you're not really using the web interface. But otherwise, if we just use the predefined Word, Excel, PowerPoint links here, and because my organization requires sensitivity labels, it's asking me to do that before it's going to let me edit it. But the main thing I don't like about this is no matter how you've got it set up, it is going to open in the web version of Office. So I can rename it here. I can start working on it, and you can use the web version of Office. It's not terrible. There are limitations, as I said. The layout can come out a bit different to how they do in the desktop version of Microsoft Office. Otherwise, if I close this file, I can see my file there that I've just saved. And now when I click on it, it opens it in the desktop version of Office. So it's a bit more clunky. There's a few more steps involved there in doing that method. But it works. It's not too complicated. But if you are using the web interface, there are a few other things you can do here. If you click the three dots, you can rename the file here. You can download a copy of the file here, and you can also click to access the version history. There we go. So I've got a couple of different versions there. I've just created this file, and every time I've opened it or made a change to it, it's saved a new version of that file. So again, really useful if you may have made a mistake or lost some work. Let's talk about moving content around. Now, if you need to move a substantial amount of content in SharePoint, so we're talking hundreds of files, I'd recommend asking your IT to use a proper migration tool, because the move function in SharePoint can go really wrong when you're working with large numbers of files. A load of files can fail to copy or fail to move, and you can be in this position where you're just not understanding what's copied and what hasn't copied. So if you are moving hundreds or maybe thousands of files within your SharePoint environment, there are tools like the SharePoint migration tool, which is free, that your IT team can use to properly manage that process. But if you're working with a small number of files, maybe not more than a couple of hundred, there is no real hard limit. You may move hundreds of files and it may move without any issue, but just be wary of that. But if you are moving a smaller number of files, maybe one file, maybe just a couple of hundred files, you can click on a folder or just a file or multiple files and folders, and then you've got this move to option there. And that will allow you to, using the breadcrumbs at the top there, click up a folder, or click on one of the links to access different sites on the left-hand side. So I'm going to move this into the next folder up, Z demo, and then I'll just click move there, and that would move those. But I don't want to do that right now. The other thing you can do, and if you're just moving things around, within this kind of area, is select the files, or maybe just one file that you wish to move, and you can actually just drag and drop it. So if I wanted it to go into the parent folder, or maybe the next one up, you can see as I hover over Z demo there, it kind of goes green, or it's actually navigating me into that folder. But if we go back to my demo docs for a second, I can just also drag that around here. So we can see it's green highlighting the folder or the location that it's going to move it to. Okay. So there we go. And you can see at the top there it's moving. So we've got the little spinning wheel, and it's now come up to say that it's moved. Now, if I had tons of files, it is going to take a little while longer to move them. In OneDrive, if you want to move a file or a folder around, it's exactly the same. To an extent, it's you can just drag and drop them. If you did want to move them to a completely different site that you don't have synced, I would recommend doing that via the SharePoint Web Interface. In general, I would recommend using the SharePoint Web Interface to move more than just a few files around, because otherwise that's going to be syncing and syncing and resyncing across many different devices, including your own, before that change goes through. So even if you are using OneDrive and you haven't been trained to use the SharePoint Web Interface, by your organization, the SharePoint Web Interface is still there, whether it's being used or not. So I would recommend using that web interface to to move files and folders around rather than OneDrive. The final thing I want to show you is how you would deal with uploading a new version of a file that's already in SharePoint. So let's say we've got our terms and conditions here. Over the years, I've made many changes to this. You'll see that I don't have terms and conditions version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because all of that version history is going to be saved automatically in SharePoint, as I've demonstrated. Now, whilst generally you don't need to download a copy of a file from SharePoint to make a change to it, and you shouldn't do that. You should just be opening it through SharePoint or OneDrive. Perhaps you need to send the file to someone outside of the organization, and maybe you don't want them to have access to your SharePoint. In that case, you can click the 3 dots next to the file, hit the download button, and then email that over to them. When they send it back to you, you need to make sure that the file has exactly the same name. And if it does, I'm going to just drag that into SharePoint here. And I'm going to get this warning here to say there's a file with this name that already exists in SharePoint. So we've got a couple of options. Do we want to keep both? If we do that, it's going to add, it's going to upload the file, and it's going to add a 1, 2, 3 or whatever to the end of the file, depending on how many you've got in there. But what really I'd recommend doing is just hit replace, and that uploads the new version of the file, but it keeps all of the previous versions of the file that you had saved there. So we're not ending up with all these multiple versions of the file here. It's all kind of nested into one file. A common question we get is, if you send this file to someone outside of the organization, are they going to be able to see all the previous versions of the file? The answer is no, they're only going to see the version of the file that you have sent them. They're not going to be able to see all of the previous versions at all, unless you've given them access to your SharePoint. Now, it is possible to share files from SharePoint here just by clicking the 3 dots here and clicking share. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail, because you need to be really careful using the sharing functionality with people inside and outside your organization. And it's really important that your organization has properly set up the external sharing before you start thinking about sharing things for yourself. So I'm not going to show you that in this video, but if you would like to talk to us more about your own SharePoint, as I said, we help organizations all over the UK. We offer training, we offer SharePoint deployments, or just some consultation if you're not sure where to go next. There is a ton of functionality that I've not shown you today in SharePoint. This is really just scratching the surface. So please do get in touch, add me on LinkedIn, and drop me a message if you'd like to talk about your own SharePoint project any further. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe.